When a black man closes his own community pool as HOA president, a nosy neighbor calls 911, convinced he doesn't belong. But what she didn't know was that her call would uncover a secret that would shake the entire neighborhood to its core. HOA Karen calls 911 when black man closes his own pool, but she had no idea what he found out. It was a golden hour kind of evening, the kind that made Magnolia Ridge look like a postcard. The pastel pinks of sunset danced off manicured lawns, and the neighborhood pool shimmered in soft ripples under the fading light. Jason Reynolds adjusted his grip on the keyring dangling from his belt loop and headed toward the pool gate with a clipboard in one hand. He wore the HOA-issued polo and khaki shorts, nothing flashy, just clean and professional. The evening shift to close the pool was part of his new duties as the recently elected president of the Magnolia Ridge Homeowners Association. He didn't mind it. It was quiet, easy work, and he liked taking care of the neighborhood. After all, he just bought his house 2 years ago, his first home. It meant something to him. Jason checked the water's chemical levels first. The readings were within range. He walked the perimeter, noting a loose tile in the northeast corner, and scribbled a quick reminder on his clipboard. It will be fixed next week. As he reached for the pool skimmer to remove a few fallen leaves, he felt eyes on him. That strange sensation crawled up his spine. Familiar, unwelcome, but too routine to be surprising anymore. Across the wrought iron fence stood a woman, blonde bob, oversized sunglasses despite the low sun, wearing the universal Karen uniform. Yoga pants, branded sneakers, and a tank top that read Live, Laugh, Love. Her name was Linda Whitmore, but everyone in the neighborhood knew her as that neighbor. The one who called the HOA if your grass was half an inch too tall. The one who stared out her windows like it was her civic duty. The one who appointed herself the unofficial sheriff of the block. HOA Karen. Jason gave her a polite nod and went back to work. He figured she'd wander off. She didn't. Instead, she stood statue still, glaring, then slowly raised her phone. Jason heard the click of a camera shutter. Then she started recording video. Great, he thought. Here we go. As Jason began locking the storage closet and gathering the cleaning equipment, Linda stepped closer to the gate. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice thick with suspicion. "What exactly are you doing?" Jason turned around slowly, keeping his tone calm. "Just closing the pool for the night. HOA duty." She narrowed her eyes. "You have no business being here." Jason let out a breath and gave a polite smile. "I live here. Jason Reynolds. Maplewood Lane." She blinked hard, scoffing like his answer wasn't good enough. "I've lived here for 12 years, and I've never seen you. I know everyone on this block." "Well," Jason replied, locking the gate behind him, "I moved in 2 years ago. You may have missed me." Linda tilted her head, lips pursed. "We've had a lot of trouble around here lately. Strangers at the pool. People coming in who don't belong. You can't blame me for being cautious." Jason held up his badge clipped to his shirt, a laminated ID with the HOA seal and his name. "I'm a new HOA president. Got elected 3 weeks ago. I'm just doing my rounds." But Linda wasn't convinced. "That's funny," she snapped, "because I'm on the HOA committee and we didn't elect you." Jason wanted to laugh. She'd missed both meetings where the elections were discussed and held. She hadn't even RSVP'd. She just assumed things never changed unless she gave her blessing. "I'm not sure you were at the last meeting," Jason said gently. "I don't need to attend every meeting to know what's going on in this neighborhood," she snapped. Then her tone shifted into something sharper, more pointed. "You expect me to just believe some random man I've never seen is running the HOA now?" Before Jason could answer, she stepped back and began dialing her phone. "You know what? Never mind. I'll let the police figure this out." Jason froze. He had seen this movie before. Too many times. "I don't think that's necessary," he said, trying to keep his voice level. But she was already talking. "Yes, hello. There's a suspicious individual at the community pool. He's locking things up, acting like he owns the place. I don't think he belongs here. He's a black man, tall, late 30s maybe. No, I don't feel safe approaching him. Please send someone right away." Jason just stood there, hands visible, not moving, not speaking. The sun dipped lower, shadows stretching long over the concrete. The absurdity wasn't even surprising. He'd done nothing wrong, but he knew better than to let pride turn into confrontation. It never worked out well when people like Linda made calls like that. 5 minutes later, a police cruiser pulled up to the curb. The lights weren't on, but the engine idled heavy. Linda rushed over to meet the officer like she was delivering a report to the chief himself. "There," she said, pointing. "That's him. He said he's the HOA president, but that can't be true." The officer looked over at Jason, who hadn't moved from his spot. "Sir," the officer said, walking up. "Mind showing me some ID?" Jason nodded, calm and measured. He pulled his license and HOA badge from his shirt pocket and handed them over. The officer inspected them, then looked up. "He's the HOA president," the officer said, glancing back at Linda. Linda's face crumpled slightly. "But that's impossible. I would have known." "Ma'am," the officer said evenly, "he has every right to be here. Everything checks out." Jason raised his eyebrows at Linda, not smug, not angry, just tired. "I was just locking up," he said quietly. The officer handed back his documents. "All good here. You have a good evening, Mr. Reynolds." "You too, officer," Jason replied. As the cruiser pulled away, Linda stood in silence. Her face went pale, then red, then oddly defensive. "I was just trying to keep the neighborhood safe," she mumbled. Jason clicked the final padlock on the gate. "Next time," he said, "maybe just ask." Linda opened her mouth like she wanted to say something more, but no words came out. She turned and walked away, faster than she needed to, disappearing into her manicured yard like nothing happened. Jason stood for a moment, watching the sun finally dip below the trees. He exhaled. This was what it meant to be both neighbor and suspect, to be visible and unseen. But he'd handled it, calmly, professionally, and now he had a lot more to think about. Because Linda's comment about the HOA elections stuck in his head, and what he was about to uncover next would blow the lid off something much bigger than a simple 911 call. The morning after the incident, Jason Reynolds sat at his dining table with a fresh cup of black coffee and his laptop open to the HOA admin portal. The glow of the screen reflected off his glasses as he reviewed maintenance logs and pending service requests. But his mind was far from chlorine levels and landscaping complaints. Linda, that whole mess at the pool still hung heavy on his thoughts. He wasn't angry. He was used to being second-guessed, talked over side-eyed. But it was the way she said, "We didn't vote for you," that gnawed at him. Not just the implication that he didn't belong, but the assumption that she held some silent power over the community. It didn't sit right. And the more he thought about it, the more he realized she wasn't alone. There had been murmurs, rumors even before he took office. Whispers of shady HOA deals, missing funds, unapproved vendor contracts. But he chalked it up to neighborhood gossip until now. Jason decided it was time to dig deeper. Not out of spite, but out of responsibility. He wasn't just trying to survive the HOA system anymore. He was the system now, and if something was rotten inside it, he needed to know. He logged into the HOA's digital archives, a clunky but thorough file system containing 10 years' worth of meeting minutes, vendor contracts, invoices, emails, and board votes. He didn't need to dig long before things started to get weird. The first red flag came from a landscaping invoice dated 6 months ago, $14,000 charged to a company called Green Horizon Services for a seasonal beautification package. The job supposedly included tree trimming, new planters, mulch, and decorative lighting for the entrance of Magnolia Ridge. But Jason knew that project had never happened. He walked by the entrance daily. The same old azaleas were still there, half wilted, and the lighting had been broken for over a year. So where had the money gone? He dug further. Green Horizon Services wasn't listed in the HOA's vendor registry. The EIN number tied to their invoice bounced back invalid. He checked the address. Nothing but a P.O. box in another county. When he ran the company through the state business registry, it didn't even exist. Jason sat back in his chair. Someone had funneled thousands of HOA dollars into a phantom company. Then he started seeing the same pattern with other expenses, security upgrades billed to a company called Falcon Ridge Solutions, $9,200. Another for community Wi-Fi maintenance from Signal Shore Inc. for $1,500. None of these vendors had websites, contact numbers, or any visible presence. All invoices were signed by a familiar name, Linda Whitmore, listed as the previous HOA treasurer. Jason's heart beat faster, not from fear, but from clarity. This wasn't neighborhood gossip anymore. This was fraud, and it had been going on for years. By noon, he had a full folder of documentation, invoices, emails, meeting minutes where budget allocations were quietly approved with minimal detail. Jason printed out a stack and clipped it neatly together. He wasn't looking for revenge, but accountability? Absolutely. That afternoon, he attended a routine HOA planning meeting in the community clubhouse. It was supposed to be a quick one: budget updates, pool equipment quotes, and summer events planning. A dozen homeowners trickled in, coffee in hand, flipping through printed agendas. Linda was there too, seated at the far end of the table, arms crossed, wearing a strained smile. She hadn't said a word to Jason since the pool incident. Word had already started to spread around the neighborhood. Jason heard a couple of whispered, "Did you hear what she did?" comments in passing. But Linda sat like nothing had happened. Jason let the meeting go on for 15 minutes before he cleared his throat and stood. "Before we continue," he began, "I have something important to bring up regarding HOA finances." Linda stiffened. Her fingers twitched slightly, tightening around her coffee cup. Jason placed a manila folder in front of him and opened it with deliberate calm. Over the last 18 months, nearly $40,000 has been billed to companies with no verifiable presence, no services rendered, and no traceable business licenses. The invoices were submitted under various names: Green Horizon, Falcon Ridge, Signal Shore, and all approved by the prior treasurer. The room fell silent. Each invoice was signed off by the same person. Jason continued, "Linda Whitmore." Murmurs rippled through the table. One board member leaned forward. "Wait, what?" Jason passed around copies of the documents. "I did some verification. These companies don't exist. The work never happened, and the money is gone." Linda's face went pale. "Are you accusing me of theft?" "I'm saying the records speak for themselves," Jason said evenly. "I'm asking the board to vote to conduct a formal audit, involve a forensic accountant, and potentially contact legal counsel to address the matter." "Jason," she snapped, voice rising, "this is outrageous. I've served this neighborhood for over a decade. You think I need to steal from my own community?" "I think," Jason replied, steady as ever, "that loyalty to a community doesn't make someone immune from accountability, especially when the numbers don't lie." Another board member, Mark, chimed in. "I always wondered why we never saw those upgrades she kept talking about. She said they were delayed. But now this." A vote was called. The board unanimously agreed to bring in an external auditor and freeze all non-essential expenditures until the investigation concluded. Linda sat frozen, her face somewhere between rage and disbelief. Her world, the one she had controlled through intimidation and passive aggression, was cracking. After the meeting, she stormed up to Jason. "You're trying to ruin my reputation." "No," Jason replied. "You did that on your own. I'm just making sure people see it." Linda stared at him for a long beat before turning and walking away without another word. No apology, no explanation, just silence. Jason stepped outside into the warm air, heart thumping, but not from confrontation, from resolve. He had always been taught to keep his head down, to avoid rocking the boat. But sometimes the boat needed to be rocked, because the people who pretended to keep it afloat were often the ones secretly drilling holes in the bottom. Over the next week, things moved fast. The auditor found more inconsistencies, checks made out to Linda's personal account, emails where she approved payments without board votes, even attempts to change bylaws quietly in her favor. Neighbors started talking, first in whispers, then on Facebook, then at community events. Jason didn't speak much. He let the facts speak for themselves. But people started seeing him differently now, not just as the black guy who got the cops called on him, but as a leader, a protector of the neighborhood. And Linda? She stopped showing up to meetings. Rumor had it, her lawyer told her to lie low. Her reign of fear, silence, and coded superiority was over. But for Jason, this wasn't about taking her down. It was about building something better. What he didn't realize yet was that while uncovering her secrets, he was about to stumble across something even bigger. Something that went beyond Linda, beyond money. Something that would shake Magnolia Ridge to its core. The fallout from the audit left a tremor that ran through the core of Magnolia Ridge. Linda Whitmore was no longer attending HOA meetings. Her once feared gaze that used to silence neighbors had vanished, replaced by curtains drawn tight and a for sale sign that popped up 3 weeks later like a quiet surrender. Jason Reynolds should have felt vindicated. He'd exposed the corruption, held power accountable, and shifted the culture of a community that desperately needed it. Neighbors who had once avoided him now waved when he walked his dog, and some even thanked him quietly, especially those who'd had their own uncomfortable run-ins with Linda or others like her. But Jason wasn't the type to pat himself on the back. Something still bothered him. When the auditors wrapped up their work, they turned over an external hard drive with digitized files they had recovered, items not stored in the usual HOA cloud folders. These were documents buried deep in local backups, tucked inside mislabeled folders like archive_2009_ and used and test_misc. Jason, curious and cautious, went through them late one evening. That's when he found it. A scanned letter, dated 2017, stamped with the HOA's seal, titled Deed Restriction Amendment, Ownership and Membership Clarification. It didn't look like much at first glance. Legal boilerplate. But Jason had reviewed enough HOA bylaws recently to know when something was off. This one wasn't standard. It referenced a clause he'd never seen before, one that wasn't in the public document homeowners had access to. The clause read, all new homeowners are required to be reviewed and approved by the standing HOA board prior to formal community membership being granted. The board reserves the right to deny or delay membership in cases deemed inconsistent with the community's traditional values, appearance standards, or demographic preservation goals. Jason reread the phrase demographic preservation goals 4 times. His stomach sank. This wasn't just corruption. This was discrimination, written, signed, and buried. He kept digging and found something even worse. Notes from a 2018 board meeting that had somehow never been entered into the official minutes. In it, the then president, a man named Harold Green, referred to Jason's property before it had even gone on sale. The note read, we've received notice that a young black professional couple has submitted an offer on 119 Maplewood. Suggest delaying approval. Could create a precedent. Jason sat back in his chair, stunned. That house was his. He had wondered why the closing process had taken so long, why the seller kept stalling, why the HOA paperwork took weeks more than it should have. Now he knew. They hadn't wanted him, not because of income, not because of his credit, but because of who he was. Jason printed everything, every file, every note. He made backups. This wasn't just unethical, it was illegal. He called a meeting with the current HOA board, which had now mostly turned over after Linda's exposure. When he presented the documents, the room went cold. Is this real? Mark, now vice president, asked in disbelief. It's all time-stamped and verified, Jason said. They weren't just committing financial fraud. They were gatekeeping the neighborhood. Illegally. Another member, Lisa, turned pale. We could be sued. The whole HOA could be liable if someone digs this up before we report ourselves. Jason nodded, which is why I'm not suggesting we bury it. I'm suggesting we bring it all into the light. And so they did. They called a full community meeting. No agenda, just a simple notice taped to every door. HOA special session, transparency and truth. That night, the clubhouse was packed wall to wall. Couples in folding chairs. Seniors who never attended meetings. College kids back home for summer, standing along the walls. Jason stood at the front with a stack of binders beside him. He didn't rant. He didn't rage. He laid it all out like an attorney in court. The fake vendors, the hidden clause, the racial gatekeeping, the stolen funds. The entire iceberg that had been under everyone's noses while they were all just busy trying to get through the day. People gasped. Some cried. Others sat frozen in disbelief. And yet, no one shouted him down. Because they knew, somewhere Deep inside, many of them knew the neighborhood wasn't as innocent as the white picket fences made it look. "I was never supposed to live here," Jason said, voice calm but filled with weight. "But I did, and then I ran for office. And some people didn't like that. But here I am, because I love this community and we deserve better." The silence that followed was electric. Then the applause started, hesitant at first, then full, rippling through the room. After the meeting, an older gentleman approached Jason quietly. "I've lived here since 1995, he said. "I wish someone had spoken up back then. I'm sorry it took so long." Jason smiled softly. "We're here now." In the weeks that followed, the board voted unanimously to purge all hidden clauses, file a report with the county, and make public the changes to the bylaws. No more secrecy, no more loopholes. They opened board seats to wider participation, began translation for bilingual households, and hosted open forums to hear from residents who had felt unheard for years. Jason became more than an HOA president. He became a community builder, a bridge. Local media got wind of the story and requested interviews. Jason declined most of them. He wasn't interested in becoming a symbol. He wanted to mow his lawn in peace, walk to the pool without being stopped, and raise his future family in a place where no one called the cops on you for doing your job. But he did give one statement to the local paper. This was never about revenge. This was about truth. If we're going to live in these communities together, we have to make space for each other, not just on paper, but in practice. By the time summer came around again, Magnolia Ridge was different, more honest, more diverse, more welcoming. And on a breezy June afternoon, Jason walked past the pool he once got the police called on him for locking up. A group of kids ran by in wet towels, laughing. A Latina mom waved at him from a shaded bench. An elderly couple asked him if a new snack vending machine was his idea. It was. Jason smiled, nodding politely. Then he looked across the fence and saw a new for sale sign across the street. Linda's house. The property had finally sold. He didn't feel triumph. He felt relief. Because sometimes progress doesn't come with fireworks. Sometimes it comes with quiet victories, an honest vote, a broken system fixed, a door left open instead of shut. And Jason Reynolds, the man who was never supposed to belong here, now belonged more than ever.